So my name's Keith. The last name is Soster. I'm Director of Student Engagement and Sustainability and Training and Development for Michigan Dining. I know, but I'm the sustainability geek. I also work with student life as a whole to bring sustainability initiatives forward. And so I'm excited to moderate this panel today. So before we had our first panel was sustainability, right, and ensuring sustainability. Our next panel after that was our vendors or procurement or distribution. And so now we're going to talk about how to make it work, right? And so I'm going to turn it over to the panelists up here. They'll each have 5 minutes to introduce themselves, and I want them to share their background, describe the high-level change and process their institution went through to integrate sustainable food procurement into their organization. So we will start with Adam, our first panelist. Adam.
Hi, good afternoon. Adam Millman, Senior Director of Auxiliary Operations for Yale Hospitality. So we have a quite unique operation where our mission is not a food service organization or food service provider. Our mission is to nourish a culture of education. And we believe it's our responsibility to educate students about sustainability while they're on campus. And we do that through what we think is really a strategic advantage, where we have 14 small residential colleges, where we have 14,000 opportunities every single day to touch students very personally. Unlike very many large colleges where they have 1 or 2 dining halls, we have these 14 where students can really interact with our cooks and our managers on a daily basis and have conversation about what we're doing and why we're doing it. We're an 85% plant-based organization. We made that change. Started about 15 years ago, and over the time has grown to about 85% plant-based every single day on our menus. We do offer animal-based protein, but we do it in very small quantities on a daily basis. We have a very robust food literacy program on campus, and we do that to outreach to the community, to our employees, which was really the #1 thing that we needed to do when we shifted the sustainability aspect, which is really to educate them and get alignment from them so they believed in what we were doing and why we were doing it. And part of this food literacy program is a number of food conversation events where we bring speakers and chefs to sort of talk about relevant topics in the food industry on a daily basis, as well as things like farm tours, where we bring students to the farms, not only to see where their products are coming from, but to meet with the farmers so they understand when they become policymakers or leaders in the future, what decisions they make and how it affects the livelihood of these small farmers. In addition to food literacy, we recently reached out and branched to a not-for-profit in China and start working with them on trying to shift sustainability in China with the plant-forward focus. So we've been working with a company called Good Food Fund in China, where we brought this cultural exchange of chefs here to the U.S., as well as chefs from the U.S. are going to China next year to continue this sort of educational component. So that's a little about us, and I'll add more.
Hello, I'm Steve Mangan. I'm the director at Michigan. My background is one where I started out in culinary, and somehow I've managed to end up running these large food institutions. Our sustainable story, or my sustainable story, started 40 years ago when, as a chef, had it drilled into me to be very cognizant of 100% utilization of products, whether they're plants or animal-based, really reducing waste, making sure if we have any foods that are left over, we get it into the hunger system and so on. So I've been carrying that with me throughout my career in different places. I ended up at Michigan 5 years ago, and our sustainable story at Michigan really started in 2011 when the university started thinking about sustainable procurement with food. And we're given this challenge of buy 20% sustainable by 2025 using the STARS recording tool. And so we started then, and really it only started with one chef in a dining hall who was really motivated to be buying local foods. And he brought in a fighting with the procurement system to figure out how do we get a small farm into this big institution. Over many years it evolved, and it went very slowly into 2014 when we consolidated all the self-operated dining restaurants and cafes and C-stores and catering into one department. So Michigan Dining is relatively new. I was recruited to take the lead on how we put this together. And the first thing we did was dismantle the procurement system that we had here with food. When I arrived, we had the prime vendor had an exclusive for everything. We had to break all the rules to get 2 local farms in here while the prime vendor had everything else. So we worked very hard in educating our procurement team about what's the latest idea with food is. Bringing in secondary vendors, local vendors with produce, with seafood, with animal products, so that we could start sourcing closer to home. Over time, we've really expanded that, where probably 30% of our spend now is with the small vendors and about 70% is with our prime. And our whole approach now is to be one of what I call a forager. Back when I was 40 years ago, when I was a chef in restaurants, I used to buy forage products from the hippies out in the Northwest. So we get mushrooms and truffles and berries and things. It was all organic then, right? I wasn't worrying about organic at the time. But so now I'm thinking of these large institutions like us all sitting at the table. We're foraging for the products we need to meet our goals around student success, whether it's the gateway piece of starting at a 20% local spend. And I think we're all of us at the table are really moving beyond this, thinking about you've got to hit a certain percentage. An example is when I first started with the exclusive vendor, it would have cost me $300,000 to move 200,000 pounds of cage-free liquid eggs or regular eggs to cage-free. When we switched from that vendor to the vendor we work with now, which is Gordon's, it cost me $30,000. So we take a patient line on it. Instead of buying grass-fed beef from New Zealand or Australia, which in my opinion as a public institution is a sin to send our money out of the country, we developed herds with our ranchers in Michigan and worked with our secondary meat producer to start having enough local products available for us. And then we work through manipulating and getting the ranchers to understand they can sell the prime parts of that beef into restaurants for $20, $30 a pound. And I'm glad to buy all the ground beef and legs they've got so they can keep the process moving and keep moving more heads of beef into the system. So that's just 2 examples of what we've done to forage. And it continues as we start thinking about the mission-driven work we're doing. So over 5 years, we've really moved the dining program from just thinking about the transaction of getting food on the table to one where, like Yale, we're really starting to think about how does dining on campus support the mission of the university and the idea of driving student success through food. And, we can categorize this in several different ways. So wellness and nutrition is certainly a key point for student success. We've got to feed people right. We're pushing our vendors to, we're not going to buy anything with high fructose corn syrup. We're pushing reduced sodium. We're looking at trans fats went away years ago. We're really looking at pushing them to provide us with clean label. Instead of just taking what they've got, we're starting to disrupt the whole procurement thinking where we're going to tell them what we'll buy and how we want to buy it and at the price we're going to pay. And if they want to do business with us, they will. If they don't, they'll say, hey, sorry, it doesn't work for us. And we keep banging away at it until we find out where we want. The other mission-driven piece is teaching our students about sustainability. We've seen some changes. When I arrived at the university was thinking about this percent of spend as your sustainable target and what you're going to do. Well, all of a sudden, we have a new president, and we have waste reduction initiatives now to reduce the landfill contributions we make every year by 40%. Well, how do you do that? Well, in dining, we went compostable. We've reduced our landfill contributions in the dining program by 35%. We're leading the university on the work that we can do with that. And then this year, all of a sudden, it's carbon. The university is trying to figure out how are they going to go to carbon neutrality. So again, we've got students engaged with us. We're starting to map out many of our recipes with carbon contribution. We've got some graduate students now who are working on a project to explore how can dining become carbon neutral in 10 years. And so we're really starting to look at how we can do that. And we're trying to include the students in that education around not just sustainable spend on local farms, but what the broader base of sustainability is about. We're working on academic partnerships. Keith has been a main driver on this. He does over 100 projects with students every year from all kinds of things, from robots to analysis of our spend to it's just crazy stuff he's doing all the time. And we're working with the School of Public Health. They're doing a sugar study right now as we look at how can we reduce sugar drinks on campus. Public Health has also done a lot of work on food insecurity on campus here as well. And it's pretty interesting how we can interact with the community around us, not just on campus, but in Ann Arbor, in the state, and nationally coming out of our students from Michigan. And the last thing we think about with sustainability, the university has a huge initiative on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So food's a huge driver around this conversation with Global Foods, celebrating our staff from around the world that can contribute and interact with our students about how to cook and bringing authenticity to our foods that we have. We've just set up a food pantry that opened last week for dealing with the students that are food insecure. So we're really starting to think, how does food intersect with all these different areas? How can we disrupt the system of procurement that's out there so we can start serving our students and have them take these ideas around the world with them as we move forward. So having a great time.
No, I don't know how to follow that, actually, but I'll follow it by turning my mic on. I'm Anne McDonald. I'm the Assistant Vice President of Ancillary Services at the University of Toronto in Ontario, Canada. Any other Canadians here? No. Outnumbered. Oh! Bless you. Bless you. University of Toronto is Canada's largest. We have about 90,000 students spread over 3 campuses in 2 municipalities. Toronto is actually the 4th largest city in North America as well. So we're very, very urban. I come from the downtown campus. We're in a very urban environment. And however, we are blessed in Ontario that we are in a region that is a very robust agricultural region, and there are some protected areas as well in the Greenbelt, which makes it sort of a good haven for us as buyers of local food. So we started our journey in food services doing local food procurement. I like to say we were local before local was cool. And in Canada, there was a book published in 2007 called The 100-Mile Diet. And that's when it became a thing. So in 2005 was when we started thinking about it on our campus as a result of a faculty member who was a researcher and a speaker and a publisher who had previously worked in media. And she eventually formed an organization called Local Flavor Plus, which was a certification organization. And what you see on the screen here are we still sort of follow these criteria. These were criteria that she established in Local Flavor Plus back in 2005, 2006, when her firm, her nonprofit organization was founded. At that time, she connected with us in food services and said, what do you think about local procurement? And we didn't know what to think about local procurement. Because she was a former reporter, she was very good at selling this idea to us, and we started to think more about it. One of the things that she was very fond of talking about was that local and sustainable aren't necessarily the same thing. And so what she and we all worked on back then was to try and come up with a system where we could do more sustainable purchasing. Local was a part of that. It wasn't necessarily exclusive, right? So in 2006, we had a big campus RFP that we were doing. Back in the day, we were completely outsourced. We did an RFP at that time. We worked closely with Lori Stahlbrand is her name. and put together some language for the RFP so that we could go out, we could ask for vendors to come to the table with very specific objectives to align with ours in terms of food procurement. So we had percentages in there. We had percentage of spend across different categories of spend. We ended up hiring a contractor to do that work. We worked with them for 10 years. It was, I would say, a struggle. It was a struggle, I think, in large part because maybe we did it too early. Maybe the supply chain certainly wasn't ready. There were things that we really, really struggled with over the years. We struggled with benchmarking. We struggled with connecting smaller farms to our very large institution. We struggled with traceability and reporting and so on. In the end, we did work with LFP for over 12 years. They have ceased to exist, but we still adopt these standards. Now we do all the vetting ourselves. We do still buy this way. A couple of years ago, we decided to self-operate our campus, and so we now have most of the campus operations are run by us. We do all of our own production on campus. We have a very large team that works on this. We also have very engaged chef, and I think Steve was talking about how on his campus it started with one chef. It's interesting. It's interesting that because really on our campus too, it was a function of a couple of people in the organization being very, very committed to this idea and selling it and driving it. And now it has become an institutional priority. So these are the criteria we still use. We do the vetting ourselves. I don't love that. I'd certainly be interested in exploring ways where we could have a third party work with us to do more of this work. But it aligns for us with our own belief that local sustainable procurement is the right thing to do. We do a great deal of it, again, because we're so blessed to be in Ontario, which has so many great producers and farmers nearby that are doing good work, not just local, but with fair conditions for their workers, with animal welfare considerations, also with leadership in terms of energy consumption in their farming practices. So these are all things that we look at. And just to conclude, I would say that, for us too, this lines up with our president's priorities. Our president is an urban theorist. He believes very strongly in contributing to the city, to that the university and the city together, we need to bridge that town and gown. We need to support the local economy. We need to support the regional economy. And so as a result, this is something that's very important to us across the board in that regard. So.
Well, I get to be one of the after lunch speakers, which is always great. So my name is Eric Montell. I work for a small junior college called Stanford University. We have like driver's ed we do there. And we are looking for a sailing coach. So if anybody knows of a sailing coach, please send those recommendations to me. Those of you who don't know that, just read the paper on admissions scandal. So never a dull moment at Stanford, we say. And also we say, especially when it comes to issues or things like sustainability. I like food analogies, so we say there are many layers to the cake. So things in terms of purchasing, I think this is a great discussion, great panel so far. Thank you very much to the Michigan team, University of Michigan team. I think we should give them a big round of applause. So I'm going to also speak on behalf of my other day job, which is co-director of the Menus of Change University Research Collaborative. But I thought I'd start off with a case study, and one of them will be a sin. So Steve said there's a sin in buying, and I may be a sinner, but I work at a private university, so maybe my sins will be forgiven. I don't know. But the first one I'm going to show you is in ideas of complexity of purchasing is salmon purchasing. So If you looked at the picture today that was shown with the fires in California, we went through a drought for 7 years. And so you could buy salmon in California many years ago, and I've been at Stanford now 21 years. And but during the drought, the rivers were dried up, so there was no salmon in California. So we really looked to say, well, where could and how should we purchase salmon, which is an important part of our menu. We worked with the Alaska Seafood Marketing Institute. Actually, they couldn't identify and wouldn't because they represent all Alaska seafood fisheries. But they said, here's a few of them that could meet your criteria. We were looking for to support a family fishery, so we could have easily bought from Trident or others just to buy salmon. We also know that Alaska's seafood is protected by its constitution, so sustainability is part of the state constitution. So we know that that was a good initiative, but we wanted to support a family fishery. We also wanted to support the academic mission, so we were looking for a fishery that we could at times bring to Stanford and what we say co-teach some classes, so meet with students. They actually, so the Hardcastle's Kirk and Heather, they come down to Stanford. They teach classes in the D School, they teach classes in our teaching kitchen. And so we had this partnership going with them for a couple of years, and we're like, wow, this is really great. We feel really good about this. This is so good. And they also fish actually one time a year. We buy the salmon frozen from them. So we negotiate a price with them ahead of time. And for them, that's actually the most sustainable way to fish. It actually is best for repopulating the stock. And so we think this is working very well. And they call me up one day and they say, Eric, we're done. We're not going to do this anymore. We can't do it. And I'm like, why? Is it we're not buying enough? Is the price per pound that we negotiated with you not correct? And one of the nice things on the economic, which I like to talk about the economic piece too, is we know what our cost is going to be for the entire year for salmon. We're not a victim to the market and what's going to happen in the market with salmon. We know how much we're going to use, and they said we can't loan Stanford money. So when we go out to fish, we have all of the expenses in summer when we go fishing. And you get deliveries in ways that work for you. A couple of times a year, we'd get 3 times a year a large delivery. And that worked from storage and scheduling and pricing and everything. They said, we can't extend all of our expenses on our dollar and capture all those expenses. It's not sustainable for us. And we said, well, what would that look like? They said, well, we don't know. But maybe could you pay us for at the time we go fishing instead of the time you receive it? And so we said, well, let's try that out. One of the issues is we're going to pay you in one fiscal year for the next fiscal year. And I can tell you as a university operator, that's a tough discussion at any university. We're paying a year ahead. Why would you do that? That's just not typically done in a university. But we were able over time to convince our procurement department and other campus leaders that this was a worthwhile investment. And so we did it, and we continue this partnership today. But I think part of the story is it's important to understand what some of the business challenges are from the folks that we're buying from. And so we have to get to know them also better. It is truly a relationship. So the next one that we are working with is Pie Ranch. Pie Ranch is a local producer in the Bay Area, a local farm, and they were looking to expand their farm. And we were buying some products from them like we would for any local producer. And as a large buyer, you can easily overwhelm any single farm. You know, you're going to buy by far more than they can produce. And so they were interested in trying to, what we wanted to do is actually have them grow produce for us. So to say, hey, could you grow these potatoes? Could you grow artichokes? Could you grow green beans, kale, whatever? Could you grow those items for us? And then we know exactly what we're going to get from you. And you know what they said to us? Could you pay us ahead of time to do that so that we know that we don't have to go out into the market? So I heard today from Gordon about, can you make also the commitment to do the things you say you're going to do? And put your money where your mouth is, essentially. So part of it was, okay, let's look at how to do that one more time. But at least we had a model of how to do it. And so we said, okay, we can allocate this much produce dollars towards you to help sustain you. and also to help grow their business. And so we did that with them. So the next level of that is we said, well, there are many minority farmers, women-owned minority farmers who are trying to, I would say, get into the business of farming, a very difficult business to be in. So not just the labor aspect, but just understanding how to operate a business. So we created what we call the Farm Accelerator program. So we work with 3 farms currently, and we agree to buy everything that they grow. So these are very small producers, and Oya Organics is an example of one of them. And so we agree to buy everything from them so that they don't have to worry about going out to market. And we have a 3-year program with them. And the goal is to say, we're not going to continue this forever, but how do we help you be sustainable in your business model the first couple of years being the most difficult for them to get up and running. We want them to have financial independence. And we work with a larger aggregator, Coke Farms, in the area who helps them, teach them on the business model application, how to develop their own business. And we want to make sure that we get them up and running for those first 3 years. And then we have another group of farms that we work with as well. So we call that our Farm Accelerator program. The other thing that we do is we buy what we call deliciously imperfect produce. And so, of course, we live in the salad bowl of the nation, and you find that 40% of all the produce that's actually grown is left in the field. There is really no market for it. And so it's important to also, again, helping the farmers be sustainable to build a model for them. And at the end of the day, if you're getting a misshapen tomato like that, but you're turning it into salsa, what difference does it make? We really care, which Steve was kind of talking about the chef part. We really care about the deliciousness of food. We care about this food can be absolutely the most delicious tomato you've ever had, but most everyone is used to looking at a perfect red tomato that's very shapen in a way for a retail market. And so a lot of that food just gets left on the farms. And that's good food, it's edible food. It's also at a good price point because it's going to be lower cost. So you're going to build something that's economically viable for you and something that is a new business revenue stream for the farmers, and that's an important thing to do as well. We have our own educational farm, so we're all about supporting the academic mission. Stanford is known as the farm, so we didn't have a farm actually for a number of years. We have a 7-acre farm right now. We buy some things from them for our dining halls. They also sell in the market. We have Patrick Archie, who's the farm manager, come and teach classes with us as well in our teaching kitchen. We try to really look at how to best support the educational farm and showcase it in ways that students really get a sense of where their food is coming from on the campus. Obviously, this is very hyper-local, but we really want to do it from the educational piece. How do we teach students about how food is grown, different types of produce that you can grow, certainly in our region. And then it's important for us to educate students and build awareness of those programs. So marketing materials, educational materials, getting out in front of them. One of the areas that we certainly showed the O'Donoghue Farm produce is in our teaching kitchen. And so we allocate a lot of that towards our teaching kitchen. All right, here's my sin. So we buy all of our beef from Australia, 100% of it. And we have for a number of years. And when I presented this idea to students, they were about as quiet as you are. And they said this. They said, that's the dumbest idea we've ever heard of. Eric, that has nothing to do with sustainability. You always talk about sustainability. Your program is known for this. And this is polar opposite to that. And I said, well, let's talk about that. And and by the way, I would challenge you to look into it to say, what should we do? Is this the right decision? You help us make that decision, because how do we know? Maybe there's greenwashing going on we don't know about, and you're smart students, so you do some investigation, get back to us. And they looked into it. And we had a whole conversation around food miles. So again, we're in the drought, so we've been doing this probably 5 or 6 years. This was the #1 water savings for the university that we were doing in terms of what was happening in California. So by moving beef #1 to Australia, it was 50. We used actually the cattle industry's water consumption numbers, so we know those are fairly conservative. It was 50 million gallons a year of water savings for California. That's the number one thing at Stanford we were doing in terms of water reduction, was just not buying beef from California. Now, we can buy beef in California. It's a little difficult to do. It's highly regulated. There was some food safety discussions that were happening earlier. We were having some food safety issues with our local slaughterhouse, so we do have a food safety manager who audits all facilities. The other thing we did is we were actually able to bolt on to Safeway's a grass-fed beef program, because their ranchers' reserve beef was actually coming from Australia. So they're bringing about 40 containers in a week. Importing was new to us in terms of the timing and how to work through some of the timing issues on the importing side, but they're already bringing the containers in. So when I asked for a model before of reducing costs, we actually reduced costs by having 100% antibiotic-free beef, 100% grass-fed and grass-finished beef, and halal, which is important to us. Also, that's one of our criteria as well. So we were able to do all of the pillars that we were looking for. Currently, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to buy that criteria in the U.S. We have nothing against buying U.S. beef. We're supportive of it. But by getting grass-fed, ABF, grass-fed, grass-finished, ABF, and halal is not available in our volumes and in our market. One of our board members, actually, he raises grass-fed cattle, Tom Steyer, but he's raising 700 cattle. And I said, Tom, why are we not buying from you? You're right in our backyard. He's like, Eric, we sell out in 5 minutes in the retail world. So that is a premium product in the retail world that has a real premium price associated with it also. And we can't just go back to students and say, by the way, we're going to triple the cost of your meal plan next year because we have this great new beef program we want to do. We have to make it cost effective. We have to do menu engineering. So we'll continue to look. We have this conversation with cattle producers in the U.S. to say, will you grow the beef for us? And we will buy it from you. And but so far we haven't had that ability to do that. And then cage-free eggs. Many people are buying cage-free eggs. I don't have cage-free eggs up here. We buy them from Wilcox for the purpose of the cage-free eggs. But actually, eggs are a high volume item in most university dining programs, so the velocity is very high. And the thing to look at from a sustainability standpoint that we're focused on, the other part of beef is the greenhouse gas impact, the health, and the sustainability attributes of it are impactful. From a velocity standpoint, though, we serve way more eggs than we serve beef. We actually don't serve that much beef. Our students don't really eat that much beef, other than some of our athletes. We have a lot of athletes at Stanford. But the eggs part is to focus on the food waste part. It's something that everybody thinks of eggs as cheap. But if you look at total spend in most university dining, eggs are actually a high velocity item. A lot of dollars are going towards eggs, and yet we don't really focus in the way that we need to on reducing food waste this way. So eggs are thought of, well, we better have a pan of eggs out for breakfast because we don't want a student to come in and not have eggs. But focusing on reducing the food waste associated with eggs is similar to how we think about beef. Okay, so my other day job is co-director of the Menus of Change University Research Collaborative. We work with the CIA on this one, which would be the other CIA, the Culinary Institute of America. And so they had put a program together with Harvard School of Public Health called the Menus of Change Conference and Menus of Change Program. Does anybody know what that is? Right. So good. So what they asked us to do was, we have a close relationship with the CIA, and I'm also alum from there as well. And so they said, well, look, we're thinking about how do we get these menus of change principles within college university dining. You also have at Stanford a close relationship with faculty, which we do. We actually partner with faculty on co-teaching classes, but on research projects as well. And they said, we'd like to replicate that at other universities. Do you think any other universities would be interested in that? And we said, sure. And this is literally about 5 years ago. Sure. We think universities are very interested in it. We think universities are change makers actually in the industry. We have a lot more flexibility to do what we need to do. And it's also a group of very innovative people. So we put together this program. Our vision is really, which we just updated, cultivating the long-term well-being of people on the planet, one student and one meal at a time. So we're very focused on the student part. And our mission is really this collaboration around scholars, academic, food service members, food service leaders, executive chefs, other administrative roles, working together who are what we call accelerating efforts. So how can you move the needle much faster, much quicker around healthier, more sustainable and delicious foods, using research. Many times we think things are done and we have anecdotal stories, or we look at success measures, which are important criteria like customer satisfaction, surveys or transactions, but there's not actually the research to support that those were signs of success. So we're very much focused on the research. And then really beyond the collaborative, how do we educate beyond the collaborative as well? So we utilize these menus of change principles. You can find those online if you just look up menus of change. There's 24 principles. They're both around menu concepts, but also in general design, but also around food ingredients. And so here's really what we do, though, which is we have these different groups together from university senior leaders. So if you don't have a champion at a senior level in your university, these are called fantasies. These are dreams that you'd like to see something implemented, but you need champions at senior university levels in order to make things happen. We have dining directors as part of this collaborative. We have executive chefs because we're all about delicious food. We have academics, of course, on the research side, and we've added in nutritionists and food sustainability program managers where they have them. And we're all about this idea of pioneering research, which is utilizing dining halls as living laboratories. So we look at them as really optimal places for research projects to occur because we're about behavior change. We want to create behavior change over a student's lifetime. So if you look at from us, the students are really what we call the best way forward. We're trying to influence students over their life. So our collaborative is serving over 700,000 meals a day, and that's great, but we're really about the 15 billion meals that we calculate that they'll consume over their lifetime. How do you nudge and influence behavior? They're at a time in their life where they're making decisions about what academic program they want to go into, what major. They're also making food choices. We're going to have them as captive audience for 4 years, if they're grad students, longer. And so how do we influence their behavior, educate them to make change? Because truly students are the way forward. They are going to change the food system. They are being trained to be leaders in the industry. They're going to be parents. They're going to influence their children's meals. They're going to be business leaders. They may be start a Google or something, which have very strong food programs. They're going to influence their employees. They may be at WeWork, who says now we will not reimburse any business meals that have meat on the receipt for a business meal. So they have the ability to influence change just beyond what they're doing. So that's what our focus is really looking at students, educating students for the long term. Thank you very much.
And I will forgive you. It just points out that there's many paths to the success we're looking for. Maybe our friends from Notre Dame can help us with some absolution here.
Go ahead, Janine.
Wow, finally. This is all good. I love it. I love it. So thank you for letting me be here today. I've seen a lot of familiar faces and meeting some new ones, so it's a lot of fun. At Creative Dining Services, we feed people every day in corporate dining, college and university environments, and regional community healthcare environments. And we're a relatively still young company. We're in our 29th year of operation in the gig economy. That's old, but in something traditional like hospitality management, we're relatively young at this. And I've been around for a while. And 18 years ago, our then founders said to me, Janine, figure out what sustainability means to our clients, to our diners, and to us as a corporation. Except back then we didn't call it sustainability. We called it going green, which I probably shouldn't say on this campus, but that's what we called it. And so that was the beginnings of our sustainability programming. And for the first several years, I concentrated on non-food initiatives. Energy and water conservation, recycling, composting, packaging, you know the drill. But I did that because figuring out food was hard. And I was secretly hoping somebody else would come along and figure it out. You know, the logistics, the traceability, the pricing, especially the food safety. And so I learned a lot. I went around a lot, benchmarked, tried to figure out what is this going to mean for us. And we dabbled. We did more than dabble. We engaged with local and regional providers. But back then, sustainable food was really sort of local or organic or both. It really, at least for us in our experience, from 2003 to 2008 or 9, it really wasn't that much more sophisticated. And then a tsunami came of our clientele just becoming so much more sophisticated, the market becoming so much more sophisticated with ASHI Stars and the Real Food Challenge and PETA report cards and healthcare without harm and all these different best practices and prescribed paths. It became very obvious to us that we better get a lot more sophisticated and a lot more strategic real quick. But one of the great things about being a small and leaner organization is that you can move very quickly. And we moved faster than our strategy. We had to. And for the most part, we did things very, very well, but we're often in the weeds. And so we became a lot more thoughtful and purposeful about creating what we call a tier 3 supply chain. We have our prime vendor relationships, our regional vendor relationships, mostly around produce and specialty items to support catering and higher end things. And then we have a 3rd tier program now that's called Farmstead, and it's doing very well for us and for our clients. We have so far in 5 states built 38 direct to farmer producer relationships. We operate in 12 states. So I still have work to do. And it's not so easy outside of Michigan. We are so blessed with biodiversity and a state agricultural department that provides multiple resources, including through Michigan State Extension, but also resources here at U of M, and a very collaborative atmosphere of sharing of best practices. I don't have that in all the states that we operate. We operate in areas that are literally food deserts unless you eat GMO soy or corn, which there is a lot of. So this is challenging, but we are not deterred. And it becomes even more important because somewhere in there we layered in an animal welfare program, a food waste program, all of these things that have synergies. And last year, when someone mentioned earlier that, it's easy to feel in the weeds and it's important to step back and really take a look. Boy, that was exactly my plan last fall. I even announced it to our leadership council and our board of directors. We need to take a step back. We have a lot of initiatives going on. We want to make sure that we're doing them all, very well. But we need to start layering in better controls around reporting and tracking and management and making sure that everything that we're reporting out really has integrity. And everyone said, great, let's not really launch anything the first part of next year. And I'm thinking, awesome, I'm going to finally get caught up. And then in January, we said, we can't wait. We're going to launch Menus of Change, which was absolutely the right thing to do. The amount of energy and creativity and innovation that our adoption of Menus of Change has created in the last 90 days throughout National Nutrition Month and now through Earth Month as we're celebrating it and taking it into culinary innovation training over the summer when our majority of our campuses are slower. Wow, what we're seeing coming out of the field is just fantastic. If you are not familiar with Menus of Change, you could probably tell I've been to the conference and have drank the Kool-Aid. But I really encourage you to get online and to look at it. The conference is in June, but even if you can't make it to the conference, the website is extensive and the resources that they are providing to the food service industry as a whole is incredibly valuable. And it's a teaching tool designed for the food service industry across all business segments. And so, and now here comes food insecurity on our campuses. We need a solution fast. So I'm not getting a sabbatical to catch up this year, but that's okay. Because engagement with all these regional farms, we do utilize aggregators. Food hubs are my friend. They make my life a lot easier. And if you're not familiar with food hubs, myself or Christine, who said something about it earlier, are happy to share that excitement with you, because they can really help bring multiple producers online at once for you, help with all the vetting and the criteria. What all of this is doing for us is not only creating excitement and engagement, it's elevating our food. And that's why we're in business in the first place. The food, as we move more plant forward with menus of change, and we're buying more regionally, locally, not just produce, but animal proteins as well, less animal proteins, but sustainably produced. The food is just, it's beautiful. As the students say, it's Instagrammable. It's pretty food. It's delicious food. And the health and wellness component is there. And nobody even minds it because it's delicious. It really is the triple bottom line coming together, this whole plant forward thing. We're anxious to do some more reporting because we're seeing food costs reduction in areas, and we're attributing it to the plant forward. And that's even offsetting, if and when we do have extra costs involved in procuring more locally and sustainably, which is a myth that it's always true. We have many local providers that we engage with that are cost neutral or even cost effective. So it's a lot of details to manage. It's a lot of balls in the air, but I wish our strategy was caught up with what we're actually doing, but it's working for us, and the Pandora's box is open, and there's no, forget going back, there's no standing still, only going forward. So thank you.
That's great. I was up here worried because we're getting in past the time, the 5-minute per person mark. But as I look over my questions, they've answered quite a few. So when they talked about the 3 pillars, or economic, environmental, and social justice, or profit, people, and planet, they were able to share a lot of ideas. I have a question here that I want to throw out there, and then we will have people from the audience ask questions. We have about 25 minutes still. So my question, and this is for all of you, and any of you can offer up your answer. What were some of your biggest lessons learned from the process of integrating sustainable food procurement into your organization?
Well, I give one example, which is these noble ideas are great from the purchasing side as a buyer, but perhaps they don't work quite as well for the supplier as you may think. And so you can hit all the criteria that you say we check the boxes, but I think truly understanding what are some of the challenges that producers are going through is an important part of the journey. And I think, as I gave the example of our salmon fishery, that family, the Hardcastle, saying we don't want to do business with Stanford anymore because we're going to go out of business if we keep doing business with you, was something that we really had to work through. And then we saw it a couple of times. Now, we're not trying to say that we would do that every time. That's not possible for us. But I think getting a better understanding of the other side of the equation was an important learning aspect.
I think, we found the procurement of the actual products quite easy. What was the challenge was getting the engagement from our employees, right? So we're in an urban city where employees, it's not part of their culture, right? Health and wellness was not part of their culture. And so when we sort of went into this initiative to focus on health and wellness, we had to get their engagement, their alignment, and their agreement. Because if they weren't, it transpired into the food that they were cooking, right? And so when we told them we were going to replace mushrooms, 40% mushrooms in our burger, they looked at us like we were crazy, right? You don't put mushrooms inside of a burger. And so we really had to focus on the education component behind it, and making it fun for them, and sort of inspiring them to want to change, personally and professionally. And then we saw some success in it.
Janine?
First of all, Adam, I agree with what you just said, especially with culinary staff. I mean, we've had to, sometimes they feel like some of the toughest pushes I've had has been with our own team. But it reaches, all of a sudden you start getting some traction, and when they see the benefits, it's been manageable, but that was a surprise to me that there would be resistance. I don't know why that's a surprise, but the other thing I wasn't quite prepared for, but now it's a sense of pride for us, is that I had to assist quite a few small growers to even meet some of our criteria. But I also realized at the same time that this fits in really nicely with some of our initiatives around diversity and inclusion, of maybe helping bring some small producers, minority producers that wouldn't normally have access to the supply chain to market. And so, I've helped fill out liability insurance forms, tell them how to work with Michigan State Extension, just bring resources to them. And that's when it's really a relationship, right? That's when you're both in. So the second benefit out of all of this, besides the actual tracking and carbon reduction and all of this, the delicious food, but really that engagement, knowing that in some small way, or maybe not even all that small of a way, we're actually helping to change the food system. And there's times it feels like it's not budging at all, but I don't know. We're doing our little part in our little corner of the world, and that just makes work a heck of a lot more fun.
I would add to that, I don't know if Michigan is different than other places, but they're set aside the very engaged folks over in the sustainability area in public health and in dining. There's a general apathy, I think, in faculty and staff about what everybody should be doing on this. So it's kind of left to the dining programs to drive this thinking and concept. And I think it really reinforces the need for us to be marketing what we're doing, storytelling, being able to share out what it takes to change the culture and the food industry and how we procure and eat. And I think it's a huge culture change across the country that's just getting started. So, we look at waste diversion. We've got systems in place to put the right product in the right waste receptacle, but most people just don't pay any attention to that. And how do you change that? It's pretty interesting. I think we have we talk about just the details and the technical things we're doing, but it's really a bigger culture issue that's going to be much harder to solve and take much more time.
And for us, I would say one of the biggest lessons learned is that it could be cost neutral, as Janine was observing, cost neutral or even cost effective. And so that was terrific, but also it's not just the buying that makes it cost neutral or cost effective. It's like a respect for the ingredient. And so with us, our culinary team was engaged. And has been from the beginning, and it has a certain amount of, again, it's the respect for the ingredient. Portion control kind of gets in there too. Education to our consumers, our students. They know where it comes from. They also have more respect for the ingredient. So it has to, all of that kind of comes into play. It's very, very closely connected to waste. And we're very proud of the fact that we have very little food waste. So it's all tied together.
That's awesome. Thank you. I'd like to open it up for questions. And there would be people with microphones coming around. Any questions?
Hello. Sorry. So I'm supposed to introduce myself. I'm Michelle. I'm the Midwest coordinator for Forward Food. This question, I guess, is sparked by a quick statement that you, Janine, said a second ago, that one of the challenges that you experienced was culinary staff that wasn't completely embracing or on board with these concepts that we're talking about. And I was just curious to know what resources or solutions you found to combat that.
Well, of course, resources and solutions through your organization. We had our first culinary training with Forward Food last summer, last July, and it was an unqualified hit with our culinarians, because what is, especially as we really get in deeper with Plant Forward, the first thought that our culinarians are thinking is that it's always specifically vegan, and that by taking that animal off the plate, there goes your culinary deliciousness. And so creative dining has really decided to have a balanced approach in alignment with menus of change, is that we certainly feed lots of vegans, lots of vegetarians, lots of flexitarians every single day. Vegan is the backbone of our halal programming as well. So it is available at all times, at all meal periods, everywhere. However, we're really, we're advocating more plants, less meat, a lot less meat. And so I think it's putting staff through workshops, webinars. We're using webinars for spot training more and more all the time. It's so cost effective. You can throw together a very, very effective webinar very, very quickly. And so we do them just for culinary teams. But culinarians are always really inspired when you get them a bunch into a lab kitchen and they really get to play with the food. Where menus of change is being really, so far for us, very successful, is that it has an absolute, passionate focus on deliciousness. And so what's convincing, when you get fabulous produce, and the ingredients are just very, very high level, high quality. People understand the local engagement around it. You're still playing with the food. It's beautiful food, and it doesn't take it very, very long. It's once they see the ingredients, once they're playing with the food, everybody is sold. It's when we just verbalize, we're going to launch this. And, you can just see some eye rolling going on, respectful eye rolling, but some eye rolling going on nonetheless. And it's just like, if we partner, if we bring third-party experts in, if we have these workshops in the culinary schools that we partner with, if we do all of these things, we have a chef lab for 3 days every summer. If we play with the food there, then it's great. And so as long as it gets to be delicious and the ingredients get to be very, high quality, it doesn't take a lot then.
Thank you. We have a question back here.
Yes. So, Steve, as you were talking, you mentioned something that maybe started me thinking a little bit around how we're moving away from percentage goals and how, when talking about these larger ideas and coalition building, I'm interested to know if you could expand upon that. Maybe there's some nuance to that, as well as the other panel members. Do you agree with that statement that you mentioned? There are various mentions of certain percentage commitments as well. Yeah.
So in the 5 years I've been at Michigan, I've seen us have 3 different ways to measure our sustainable spend with ASHE. We're launching a new one now. The numbers are going up and down. We do the work to build it up to one point, and then all of a sudden, we're starting over again. And that's all good. Our local spend and approach to that's not going to stop, but we're really starting to think about the supply chain as we're talking here today, looking at what's happening to the food before it shows up on the truck at our dock. And that's important. We're looking at how can we reduce waste? How can we get into some of these seconds that Eric was referring to? And it's not just buying the local farm produce, but as we start looking and analyzing the carbon contribution for the foods we're buying, maybe there are better places to buy it from. Maybe New Zealand is a better place to buy our beef. We start looking at water and the energy that's plugging into this and the fertilizer and pesticides and all these things. I think we need to really, as we enter the gateway and think about getting our sustainable local spend at a decent place, where do we go next? And I think it's time to start looking beyond just hitting 20% local. I don't know what the formula is for that or where it's going, but I think we've got great people like Keith and his team of students. We're leveraging all the resources we have around us in the School of Environmental Sciences, public health folks, and I think we'll come up with a different way of looking at this and thinking maybe there's a better model for moving us forward.
Is there anyone else that wants to address that question?
Yeah, sure. I would just add, I think to dovetail what Steve is saying, it's about questioning everything that you're doing. So if your vision, and I'm sure everyone's is to be the best, right? To be the best in what you're doing. You have an academic program that's up here. Your dining program better be up here as well. It can't be, down here. So it means you question what you do and you work with other, what we would call research collaborators or subject matter experts who help advise you on decision making, because these decisions are often very complex. So we would work with the World Resources Institute, for an example. The EAT Foundation is a research collaborator with us that you saw the EAT Lancet report out today. And they're helping us look at things in different contexts. So we're evaluating just even our entire protein portfolio. And I think one of the critical parts of that is it's important to think more broadly than your own university, but how you can partner with other universities to have collective impact. So it's great, whatever's happening at Stanford, and that's fine. But if it only works at Stanford or universities that have resources, then what good is it? And so it's about having measurable impact, accelerating innovation, but doing it in a way of collectively together. And so that's going to create some tension, though, between ideas of what should be done locally and what should be done at scale, right? So, part of our goal is to do things at scale, not just to make short-term incremental improvements, but to transform the food system. So if our goal is to reduce climate change by 2 degrees by 2050, and we have a target around 2030, well, we better be doing some measurable steps that are 25% reduction of our current protein portfolio by 2030. Or we're not going to make the 2050 target. And so those are real issues that we have to work on together. And we have to, the one thing I always appreciate about, and I've worked in many food service segments, but one thing about college university dining, there's no competition beyond getting the students to the school. It's very open. I could call Steve and say, hey, what are you doing about this or that? These conversations are happening right now. It's about helping each other to become the best. And I think that's unique to this industry. And I think we need to really take advantage of that. How can we help each other to get better? How do we think more broadly beyond our own university lines? How do we transform the U.S. food system? How do we embolden and empower students to change the system? But how do we help each other? So we need to be thinking, when we're talking about sustainable purchasing, is joint purchasing initiatives. Can we come together on some ideas? As we talked about before, what are some of the sustainability criteria? Could we come together on some of those initiatives and think at scale? And then really that's going to show the Tysons of the world or the Cargills of the world why they should move in that direction. Because they won't move in that direction until they're sure that the market is there. And if we help to build that market, that's how it works, actually. So thinking more broadly, I think, is a really important step. The idea of collective impact, the idea of working together to make change. It's not just at your own university.
Thank you. We have a question up here from Chris.
Hi, everyone. It's Chris Allen from University of Massachusetts in Amherst. First, I just want to commend you on all the great sustainability initiatives that you're doing. It's very refreshing to hear all the great things that are happening. I should be very proud of what you're doing. So I just want to thank you for that. One thing I have a question about is student engagement, in terms of how active are students actually paying attention to what you're doing on campus, and how do you measure that? Second, what resonates more with students when it comes to sustainability, local, organic, or regional, and why do you think about that? And third, how do you use sustainability as a recruitment tool for incoming classes?
So obviously Yale doesn't need to use sustainability to recruit students. They want to come. So that necessarily doesn't go into our recruitment strategy. But we're finding students are very, very engaged, and they're the ones that are actually pushing us the most, right? And every single day they're engaging with us in conversations of what we're doing and challenging us to do more of that. And they're really the ones that are driving some of the programs that we're doing in waste reduction, in some of our menu changes and adaptations of our menus. They were really the plant forward movement, and it started with them. And actually about 20 years ago, the sustainability efforts at Yale started with a student focus group, and they brought in Alice Waters, her daughter was there, and they brought in Alice Waters, and that's when sort of the sustainability, health and wellness focus of Yale Hospitality started. So they were the ones sort of the driving factor of that.
Yeah, I would add students drive everything on Michigan's campus. When we reorganized, we gave Keith the responsibility to triage all the students that come to us every day, and it's a job to be able to manage that, have a relevant conversation with them, and actually, when you're on a large campus, build relationships with many students that are coming at us from every direction. So over the years, we've been tracking every engagement he's had, every project he's managed. There's literally hundreds of these things that we've worked with students, and we keep building on them. So, maybe 5 years ago, we were getting questions about how do you compost in residential. Well, now we've been composting for years. We're on to the next chapter of waste reduction and management. I think it's just you have to have systems in place so you can absorb all that energy and learning that the students are looking to get from our dining programs. And just like Stanford, we think of ourselves as a learning lab, not just for the students that work for us, but also the students that see relevance in their lives with food. So it's a pretty interesting place we land in. And your question about local, organic, regional, we don't have hardly any conversation around organic at Michigan. It's mostly driven around local. There's no real action around GMOs. They just want fresh food that's prepared great, it's craveable, looks good, and we're trying to shift what they're eating by making foods from around the world, global cuisines, more as authentic as possible, and shift them into foods that have less animal proteins and more plants. So I think they just want great food that tastes good, that has some flavor and spice and reminds them of home, no matter where they're from.
We do a lot of the same things in terms of student engagement, and we're also, like Yale in some ways, the Yale of the North, perhaps. We don't think that students come to U of T because there's good food there. We have a pretty great academic reputation. But once they're there, obviously we want them to have a terrific experience. Strengthening the undergraduate experience is a really important goal for us right now. We don't hear a lot about organic either. I mean, it's mostly local, regional, those are the interests. We engage with them through bringing farmers to the campus, bringing local chefs to the campus again, because it's urban, bringing kind of superstar chefs to the campus to get them interested in what's going on in food in the city as well is something that's important to us. And we can then have that conversation about the city, the local region, the expanding circles of food and agriculture and so on. So
our motto is students are first. They're never an interruption in our day, so they're going to be part of everything that we do. But there are students who come to Stanford for sustainability reasons. So they're going to be part of the Earth Sciences program. So for sure, they're going to be heavily engaged. I think the interesting thing is, though, is we added to that dynamic health and wellness, and you can imagine for college university students, their number one thought is health and wellness. It's higher than sustainability. I think there's also a minimum entry point that they think that you're doing anyway, which is there are programs that are important to them that they have expectations that you will have, but they're not necessarily going to be engaged with you on every point of the journey. So you can ask students, like I did on the Australian beef thing, questions at times in the right forum. But I think as a general student body, they're going to believe that you're making all the right decisions, you're doing all the heavy lifting, you're doing all the research, You're professional. You should make the best decision. So, and by the way, you're going to layer that with all, the cake analogy again, with all the special diets and all the other requirements that you have. And so you're going to make sure that all of those options are available, because why else did you force them to have a meal plan? You're ripping them off, right? So that's what they would say to you if you don't have the options for them. So I think it's also contextual, which is that students of today are interested in what you're doing them for today. They don't really care what you did last year. And so our business, all food service, all hospitality, you're only as good as your last meal. And so it's about providing that high-level, consistent program for them, but also trying to stay at the forefront of doing the research, looking at what are trends in the industry, looking where this is going, and then having strategies to get yourself to that place. Because many programs, cage-free egg is easy today, but at the time it was very expensive if you tried to implement it, and you had to have strategies to say how you would implement that instead of just implementing it all at one time, or anything else that you're doing that has additional cost associated with it as an early adopter. So early adopters are always used to looking at things and saying, here's a cost, how do we make that cost work in our system? So students are part of making that decision for us in terms of roles. We have roles that are nutrition interns, we have sustainability student interns, we have dining ambassadors, kosher interns, halal interns. We have a lot of student-specific roles that guide us and tell us what is important to them so that we can ensure that their voice is being heard and that their dining program, which it is their dining program, is reflective of their values collectively. We also have to discern whether we're listening to a vocal minority or we're listening to the majority of students, because you can get very loud voices in a university, and student voices in a university are very powerful. They have access to the president, provost, other campus leaders anytime. No one will turn them down. So it's important to understand what those voices are and also have mechanisms to get them early on before they get to your president. So you don't want to be surprised too many times. Not to say it's not going to happen. So student engagement, I think how you engage with students in meaningful ways is important. But at the end of the day, from a learning and education standpoint and changing the food system, we actually do not care whether they're more focused on sustainability, nutrition, health, and wellness. We have a lot of athletes. We're just trying to change their behavior over time. And so whatever point that they feel they want to connect, we want to make sure that we have a connection point for them. Whatever information that we want, we want to make sure that we get it to them in meaningful ways, because I would say the number one challenge on students and programs is communicating it back to them, things you're already doing. And so it's hard for them. They get a lot of information in a lot of different ways. It's information overload. And so how do you meaningfully connect to them at their point of when they want it? Because they want that information just like the rest of us when we want it. And so that's the most difficult thing, is communicating back to them.
Janine, did you want to wrap this up?
Yeah, I'll try to bring it home for you. So, I think there's an obvious reason why some of the most progressive programming in food sustainability, in the food service industry is happening on college and university campuses. I mean, the students are driving it. They didn't in 2004 when a lot of us were in our infancy with this, and they certainly do today. And like everybody else on the panel, I have one campus where organic seems to be king, but it has to do with actually some of their programming that they have there. But it's very meaningful, the local connection, even up to the point where it's romanticized a little bit. Again, maybe it's sustainable, maybe it's not, but gosh darn, it's local. And look at that family, their third generation doing this, and that's meaningful. Yeah, I mean, I get direct calls from students, and I'm a visitor and a support person to their campus. I'm not actually on their campus, but students have access to me, and I spend a lot of time with student groups, and we do all kinds of stuff with them. So,
Will you all help me thank these guys?